Media Africa. On the menu this day, we focus on the bad governance protests in Nigeria, where nationwide protests against economic hardship and perceived governmental failures kick-started in Nigeria, West African nation, on August 1st, 2024. That was on Thursday. The 10-day protest aimed to press the leadership to review policies which continue to keep millions of Nigerians in a struggling state. The government has urged caution while fearing a repeat of the violent and SARS protests that happened in 2020. Meanwhile, Kano, Yobe, Borno and Katsina state governments declared on Thursday 24-hour curfew on day 2 of the said protest, which is today. Katsina police arrested 50, while protesters in Ojoda, Lagos are demanding for President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to address them directly. On the other hand, the Nigerian Security and Civil Defense Corps, acronym the NSCDC, however, announced via statement on Friday, August 2nd, the arrest of 32 persons for vandalizing shops and other buildings on the first day of the nationwide protest against bad governance. Latest reports has it that the Commandant General of the NSCDC, Dr. Ahmed Udi, has placed all zonal commanders, head of formation and state commanders across the 36 states of the West African nation, as well as the Federal Capital Territory, which is Abuja, on red alert. Though normalcy seems to have returned in some areas, as reported by the Vanguard newspaper in Nigeria, it should be noted that over the space of a month, protests have taken place in Kenya, Uganda, and now Nigeria. Ladies and gentlemen, we shall be analyzing these latest developments in the West African country in the course of today's edition of the program. Thank you for joining us. Stay with us. Hello, fervent televiewers and fervent listeners of you Pan-African channel for you Media Africa. Thank you for being with us this day on your Pan-African channel, where we evoke these upgoing or latest developments that is unfolding in the West African nation of Nigeria, as people went to the streets on August 1st for a 10-day protest that is meant to put an end to bad governance in the West African country. Of course, is what noting the Nigerians of course, protesting against the economic hardship that has been plaguing the country for a long time. And of course, to evoke this very topic that has been on the menu for a while now, we shall be discussing this with our guests on the course of today's edition. First is Mr. FELIX ORWAKA, that is joining us all the way from Kenya. You are the co-chair of Kenya Coalition on Youth, Peace and Security. Thank you immensely for honoring our invitation.
Thank you so much.
Equally with us this day is Dr. Stanley FONGOD, who is joining us all the way from the United States in his capacity as a Pan-Africanist and as economist. Thank you immensely, sir, for taking our time to be with us this day.
Thank you for having me, Sharon. I appreciate you today.
Subsequently, we shall be joined by JUDE ABHULIMEN, who is a member of the British Project Management of Nigeria, and equally a member of the Alternative Dispute Resolution Committee, and he doubles as a member of the Justice Development and Peace Committee member. We shall be joining us all the way from Nigeria. To quick kickstart today's conversation, without further ado, I'm going to debate with you, FELIX. Now you've been following this latest developments in Nigeria, and of course we saw protests equally happen in Kenya, where you happen to be. What is your analysis as far as these ongoing protests which we've been seeing in these recent times across Africa?
Thank you so much for inviting me, as well as for the question. I think one thing which I would love to speak about the ongoing protests in African countries is that there's a lot of gaps when it comes to leadership and governance in African countries, and whatever Nigerians have decided to do is just in line with whatever they want to see for the future generation. Currently, there's issue of unsatisfied leadership which are existing in different government when it comes to the issue of economical growth of maybe young people. I'll speak as a young person, as well as also our countries are trying to fight what maybe is not directly to them. So what I can say is that different countries, they want to raise their standard to be known at a global level, yet the approach that they're taking is not satisfying the citizens. So the citizens are not able to withstand the progression that different countries want to make. And that's why you find that the economical stability of different African countries is not that well defined, because you find that there's an historical injustices that has been happening in different countries. And it's so much painful when listening to young Nigerians or the Nigerians who are on the street speaking of corruption as one of the things which are affecting their country. So they are looking on responsible leaders who can help them to get from one state to another one, but the leaders are just there to bring the hard policies on table, but the return of whatever the citizens are paying as tax are not being accountable, or they are not accounting for it. So that one is one of the things which is affecting. And I will tell you for the fact is that the same issue that the Kenyan citizen went to the street, the same issue that the Ugandans went to the street, are just the same issue that the Nigerians are going to the street because these are issues which we cannot forgo. We cannot just say that we are normalizing the issue of corruption, we are normalizing the issue of bad governance, we are normalizing the issue of not accountability. So that is one of the things which I'm seeing is coming out clear, and there's a need for the government to understand that the citizens that they are serving, we are not a first-class countries. We are just a third-class countries, which we need a step-by-step growth and development so that we can be able to address our issues one after the other one. Yeah.
Exactly. Thank you, immensely, Felix, for that brilliant preamble. Now, we just got indications that Felix is with us. As we mentioned, Felix ABHULIMEN is a member of the British Project of Nigeria. And, of course, he's part of the Justice, Development and Peace Committee. Thank you, immensely, Jude, for taking our time to be part of today's edition of Talking Points. I'll debut with you. Now, you listen to your co-panelists. We're on day 2 of the nationwide protest that kick-started yesterday in Nigeria to end bad governance in the West African nation. And now, as one who is on the ground, what would you tell us is the current atmosphere?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me, Sharon. And this is a very, would I say, a good platform to clear some, would I say, indifferences. Now, presently, I was out today doing a little bit of survey because I have an office close to where the protest was held, which is in Abuja. But right now, presently, I'm not able to leave the house. Even where I was supposed to do this, conduct this program has been shut down, the hotel which I booked. What we are experiencing presently right now is a reaction, repressed reaction over the past decades. There's been a continuity of failed governance, a continuity of failed promises, a continuity of oppression and imperialism and exploitation. We had this urge to come out to demonstrate in a peaceful way, in a non-violent way, so as the government itself can listen to the issues of the masses. But presently, right now, that's not going the same way we expect it to go. There is a lot of violence. I think I was corresponding with a friend of mine who is in Kano. I spoke to him this morning. About 60 people died in Kano just yesterday. Just for yesterday's protest alone, the beginning of the protest, 60 people died just for yesterday. Now, when you try to evaluate that and you try to look at that from a conscientious perspective, you realize that from the state of being and from the atmosphere, Nigeria as a country has failed in different ways. Nigeria as a state, as a nation, has not represent its essence as the giant of Africa. Nigeria has failed to represent the essence of democracy and to address the indifferences that has been underlining indifferences that has been ongoing for a very long time. In 2020, they had the NSAS protest, which
Absolutely.
was to stop to police brutality. And that police brutality was because police kept on harassing young men about their social income, on what was going on in their lives. And this was done with impunity. We put a stop to it, and the group called SARS, which is Special Unit for Anti-Terrorism and Cybercrime, was disbanded. But ongoing continuously, as we progress to 2024, we had an election, which was last year, and towards the election, there was already agitation because the election, the incumbent president, which was Mohamed Buhari, was also, his leadership wasn't so favorable to the people because of his policies were marginalized. The policies he kept was just to favor the northerners. So when we felt there was going to be change for the country, we believed the 2023 election was going to be that platform where we express ourselves and our votes, only for the election to be hijacked by Tinubu. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu came into power with not being the so-called prospect leader that was supposed to win that election, which we could not contest because of the bedeviling corruption in the country. Now, the Independent National Electoral Commission, prior to the election, had its commissioner reinstated. And this commissioner was sentimental to the African People's Party, which is the APC, All Progressive Party, All Progressive Congress. They were partisan. And sorry, I can't really mention names because for fear of complexities.
Yeah, that's true.
This same person was the man who conducted the election and rigged the election to favor President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, which those who were on the ground, who were observers of the election, which I was part of at my state, the numbers were not tallying with the consensus numbers that was taken in the national TV. And the funny thing is, nobody could say anything. We could not voice your opinions to no authority. There's no stakeholders who could be held accountable to. We just were silent for fear of complexities, and that happened, and he came into power. The progress was, if he comes into power, maybe there will be some kind of substantial change. Now he's in power. He's also being tribal. He's favoring the indigenous people of Oduduwa, which is the Yoruba people. These are the people favored in government. For a very long time, Nigeria suffered what I call structural violence. And structural violence is a non-violent way of stopping people from accessing their basic needs and their basic rights, to hinder people from different ways of which they can progress and different ways of which they can access the social, economic, and political resources of the government, which is something like partiality, which is tribalism, which is religion, and other aspects like corruption. This is structural violence. And for a very long time, we've hoped we would have a strong leader who would address issues that are bedeviling the country moving forward. But unfortunately, that hadn't been the case. So 2 months ago, there've been an underground protest that by the end of this month, by the end of last month, beginning of August, there was going to be a nationwide protest. Before then, there have been ways to stop the protest, which was carried out by the Department of State Security, DSS. They were tracking down phones, tracking down sponsorship, but unfortunately, due to our experiences from the previous NSAS protests of how people were targeted and violated and imprisoned unjustly, These protests was unanimously done. Presently, they can't hold anybody accountable. There is no system in place to hold anybody accountable. The citizens are just the ones coming out to air their voice that we're tired of the current situation and we demand change. If a country has its constitution and the conscientiousness of its people, I think what is most important is when your people complain or the masses complain of an issue, there is the room to listen to your people and to address, to dialogue or to negotiate, not to intimidate. For the past 1 week, people, different groups have been intimidated. Youth groups have been intimidated. You see youth groups 1 week ago coming out to rebrand themselves and profess they are non-protest, they are not part of the protests. You see institutions coming out to, peaceful institutions coming out to protest and say, oh, we are not part of the protest, we're not partisan to the protest, this is not our doings. These are silence for fear of complexities. And this is happening because of fear, because the present incumbent president was behind the shooting of the toll gate, which is Bola Ahmed Tinubu. He was behind those killings. He was behind those authorizations. I'm saying this right now. I don't know what might happen tomorrow to me. I don't know, but I'm just telling you this because an investigation that was done and carried out, the facts are there. The authorization for the shooting and killing of people at the Lekki toll gate was carried out by the incumbent governor of Lagos State, the commander of that state, who is the commander of the police, and then the person who owns the entity of which they were protesting on, which is the Lekki toll gate, which is a franchise that is owned by Tinubu. Those were the people that instigated that dispersing, which was carried out by the military. And we're seeing the same, the same process, the same approach being engaged by the same institution, which is in power right now, to disperse people, to intimidate people who want to protest, to oppress the voices and the masses of people who are trying for there to be a sustainable change and sustainable policies that are continued over time. But that hasn't been the case. And we're continuing this protest from now to the 10th of August. We don't really know how the protest is going to end. We don't really know what's going to transpire within now to the end of the protest. But these are the happenings presently as the protest is ongoing.
Thank you so much, Jude, for that detailed, I would like to say, contribution. But then I'd like to lead the next question and now to Dr. FONGOD. You listen to your co-panelists. And he, of course, cited some very powerful points, which we'll be coming back to in a bit to elaborate on in the course of this program. But then we have those that are protesting that have been asking for the leadership in power, the government in power, to address and review some of the policies that are already existing, which is making life difficult for Nigerians. Like Jude said, some complexities involved. Now, Dr. FONGOD, when you observe the ongoing protests in Nigeria, given it is not the first time Africa's most populous nation is going down to actually protest. We saw the NSAS in 2020 against police brutality, and a similar case was recorded in Kenya. Now, do you think that these demonstrations can actually address the current problem of bad governance?
Maybe, and I think that it can, but I'm not too optimistic about it. And the reason for that is because we already saw what happened during the NSAS protest. That was a singular unit. There was a singular item on the table in relationship to the protest. The protesters came out, basically saying the police brutality, which was commonly too known with SARS, was absolutely horrendous, and they had to do whatever it takes to put an end to it. I had also suffered tremendously. I think I was visiting Nigeria once when those guys actually stopped the car that I was in. We were 12 of us in the vehicle, and the way they beat up my driver was absolutely heart-wrenching. That was actually on the Auchi Benin Road in Nigeria. I will never forget. And these guys were ruthless. I will always say that the same place where demons are trained were the same schools that these individuals got their training from. They were just heartless. And so the 2020 NSAS protest, was really meaningful because then we had one objective. The target was clear. We knew exactly what we were driving at, and we could absolutely, get that done. The problem with this protest now is this: when you basically come out with the buffet, it's a cocktail of things happening, in the country that is driving economic hardship the way we are seeing it in Nigeria, and we come out, we say we're just protesting, we want to change this, we want to change that, we're looking for this. The problem is we end up changing nothing, and the only way to change this is basically says, what, Mr. President, we want you out of office. I think that this protest now is not tailored. It has to be so tailored in such a way that we basically prioritize what is it that we're actually asking for. What precisely are you looking at? If you ask 10 Nigerians today, they have 50 things, that they want to see happen so far as the government is concerned. And guaranteed, if 5 of those things were absolutely going to happen, you probably just as well change the government, ask Tinubu to leave power. And that's probably the only thing that would happen, for us to be able to see the kind of change that the citizens of Nigeria, they are asking for. The protest is legitimate. I think that we really must be able to encourage public discourse. Again, just like Kenya, just like Uganda, just like Nigeria. But what I do not understand is when we go out and we start looting public properties. It doesn't matter, the sidestepping on this, saying, well, these are French groups which basically comes in to commit these acts of these atrocities, or these are folks who basically are not even part of the coalition of those who are saying we need, reforms as far as the government is concerned. But on the fact that Nigerians, regular people are burning. I think a couple of years ago, with the xenophobic stuff that was taking place in South Africa, there were NTN buildings that got razed to the ground in Nigeria. NTN buildings. Unfortunately, MTN actually owns no building in Nigeria. Nigerians own those buildings, and they actually lease them, to this company, NTN. And MTN back then was not hiring South Africans to work in Nigeria. There were Nigerians working in Nigeria for NTN Corporation. So sometimes I think we have to, take a step back, all right, in our flaring, our heat for the moment, and then think a little bit through as to what exactly we want to do so far as a protest is concerned. When you burn property, when you go out looting, it defeats the purpose. And I also think that on the area of the government, it is heart-wrenching that you can have people in the country who are fighting just to eat, all right? And then you have folks in power that are buying luxury cars, equipping their offices to the tunes of millions of naira, and at the expense of those and those are taxes from the same people that cannot eat anything. The economic hardship in Nigeria, it's heart-wrenching. That's true. But what I do not understand is how the upper class, because there's zero middle class in the country, the middle class basically does not exist. So you have the people who have everything, and then those who basically have nothing. And to those who have everything, here is, a little bit of advice for you. The reality is that you have built this society and you have segregated yourself in these communities. Well, you build these gigantic fences, and then you put security guards at the entrance of these, communities, basically stating that if you have to come into this community, you have to come by invitation only. What you do not understand is this: once the people, the masses, have become so disenfranchised, all right, once they have become so hungry and so desperate, there will be no wall that will be too high for them to scale over. There will be no barbed wire that you will put on those fences that they will not breach. There will be no security forces that you will have in place that they will not topple. So the truth of the matter is no fence will be able to help you. What matters now is for everybody else to cool down, come, to basically address the issues, because you cannot address the issues of inequality, with the barrel of a gun. On the other hand, I am also not a proponent of the fact that just because you came into power, you have to hire everybody for equity's sake. I think that that is absolutely crazy. There's two things in life, okay, in most governments. There's this issue of equality of outcome. Equality of outcome is when we basically just try to hire everybody else, like a DEI hire. You just hire people by race, by tribes. You just want to bring them together so that you can have a cabinet that mirror image the nation. That's stupid. We have to basically hire people based on competence. We need to be able to promote equality of competence, not equality of outcome. Hire people who are gifted. Imagine you getting into an Air Peace flight, flying somewhere from Lagos, and you're going to Abuja. And then the pilot comes on the intercom and tells you that he was railing cattle in the northern part of Nigeria for 20 years. And now that Tinubu is president, he has decided, to be hired to become a pilot. He just graduated 3 days ago, and he has been in pilot school for 3 days. I don't think you will sit in that flight, because then that's insane, right? That's basically what equality of outcome looks like. Sitting in a hospital and hoping that the doctor who is going to work on you only graduated out of school because they wanted to have a little bit of people from a particular tribe, and the guy is absolutely incompetent and do not have the capacity to do anything. That's equality of outcome. We have... we have to be able to be in a situation where we bring in people based upon equality of competence, get people who are competent enough to be able to handle certain positions. And then, I think we basically push the nation forward. Secondly, I don't think also that basically what it has been reported, which I have read a lot about, the Tinubu administration basically favoring just the Yoruba people. That is insane. And the marginalization, mostly kind of a xenophobic attack on those in Lagos that are not from that are not Yoruba, but that are like Igbos or from other parts of the country. I think that too is absolutely heart-wrenching to see that happening in Nigeria. The Nigeria is the big brother on the block, so to say. So if Nigeria falls, West Africa is doomed. That's just the way it is. If something happens to Nigeria, it will be a cascading effect across the whole entire region. While we are watching this closely, I hope that, the powers that be, the power brokers in this should be able to find ways to bring this to an amicable conclusion where the people are given what they're looking for, and what they're looking for is what every citizen on the continent of Africa absolutely needs. This is the Pan-African thing. It's not just limited to Nigeria.
Absolutely, it's about promoting the Ubuntu spirit. I am because you are. Of course, that is in line with what you said, that leaders should actually promote for equality of competence and not equality of outcome. And now this leads me to my next question to you, Felix. You listen to your co-panelists. In your opinion, since you earlier on elucidated on the trend of protests across the African continent, do you think or do you expect that this protests that we saw in Kenya and what we are witnessing now in Nigeria, the outcomes would be somewhat similar? Would the protests actually bring an end to this bad governance which they are fighting for? Because we saw the SARS protests that happened under the leadership of Muhammadu Buhari, and now it's happening over a year into the leadership, or say into the reign of Bola Ahmed Tinubu. So do you think that the outcome could actually be similar?
Thank you so much. Allow me to pick from the line of Stanley by saying that if Nigeria suffers today, then the West Africa might have a shape when it comes to economical growth and everything. I want to say one thing with the history of whatever has happened in Kenya. Protests are not there to make the government look bad, but
Absolutely.
Protests are there for the citizen to bring out and air out some of the grievances that they have tried diplomatically to talk to their leaders, to explain to the system, to explain to all corners. So when you find a country going to the street, it is not a joyful method, because of one, there's a loss of life. Another one is just to show that the government, you have not been listening to your leaders. It is so much painful to say that a lot of the African leaders, they know the problem, they have the solution, but they don't want to offer that to their citizens. They're making the citizens to be their slaves. And when you see people going to protest, that indicates that they are no longer happy with the method that the government is taking towards answering for the problem. So I just want to say that the issues may be many, just as Stanley has said, and sometimes it becomes hard even for the government to pick on an issue. But whatever I can tell you is that if they go in a peaceful protest, a protest without a negative hidden agenda, a protest that it has an identity of the issue that they want to address, it becomes easy for the government to address them. I want to give you an example of the protest that took place in Kenya. The first protest that the citizens went to the ground was the issue of finance bill. And they told the government that we don't want the finance bill, not an article, but the entire bill that he wanted to bring it on board. We don't want it. It happened that the president said that this finance bill won't be passed, and I've taken it back to the assembly to discuss more about it. After that one, the citizen went outside to demand the issue of the cabinet secretary who are advising the government in different stakeholders to be pulled out or to be sent home. That was an issue that the president picked and addressed it. So I believe that when Nigerians are trying to get out to the street, I will really encourage that the young people or the community of the country should articulate issue after issue. There might be 50, all of them cannot be solved once, but let them pick one and say that the government will need the issue of fuel to be the major issue that we want it to be addressed, because it is pressing us more than any other one. So when the government deals with one, they introduce another one, they introduce another one. But if they cannot do that one, then they will confuse the government. And I'm telling you this one for free, you will find a goon or a new stream of people with another agenda. They are going to find a space to bring their agenda during the demonstrations which are taking place. That's why it got to a point that Kenya, it was hard for young people to go to the street, because different people are in the street with different ideas, with different goals, which maybe are not aligning with the economical situation of the country. So one thing which I want to say that sometimes going to the street may not be the best option. But if they are into the streets, so that means that they have tried all means possible to address the issue, but it is not working. So what I can say is that let people define their issue. And when they define their issue, it will be easier for the government to take action, as well as it will be easier for them to know what has happened and what has not happened. I want to speak with the issue of how African is seen outside. African is now seen as a continent that the citizens have woken up. The citizens are not following the colonial system of ruling. It is so much pain that different countries went to the street or corners. I will say that, like for us Kenyans, our forefathers went to the forest to fight for our independence. It becomes so much painful that now it is happening that the grandchildren are now getting to the streets to fight for their economical freedom, which is so much painful. So, but now African wants to address their own issues. And the reason why some of these protests are still picking on very strong is that there is a strain of the colonial power in the African leadership. There is how those people who lend African money wants African to be run. They need the debts to be paid according to their wish, but not the wish of the citizens. And when you see people are getting into the streets at different levels, it is because they're trying to tell the government, come back to the African culture of solving our own problem when we have it and trying to live by our means. If if the African leaders can just be patient with the growth of their country and maximize on the resources that they have internally, because I tell you, even in our country, people are extorting minerals, which if they're utilized locally, they can help us to build our country. Why can't Nigeria focus on the issue of oil and solve the issue of oil so that they can use it? Why can't Nigeria use their local minerals towards paying debts? Why can't they have a negotiation or a talking table between the government and the citizen? A table which is transparent, a table which is focusing when it comes to reforming system, but not a corrupted table, a table that you are being invited because you are going to be given something in return, but a table that has a pure and genuine heart towards helping Nigeria to grow, helping Nigerian youths to at least seek for employment. It's so much painful to see that a lot of Africans are in the Middle East country as modern slaves. I'll say that, as modern slaves, because they are being killed, but nobody is there to speak about it. So let's see on our best these protests are coming home to address our issues, but not these protests are being used to show how citizens are not responsible when it comes to addressing their issue. These protests to be used to kill young people, to kill citizens, and send it back as a threat, and which is so much painful. The issue of police brutality, the injustices, the murder cases which are happening. So the government cannot use police brutality or judicial execution as a way of silencing the voices of their people. They should not kill citizens so that they can they can send fear to them. That's why in our country we are still telling the government that the lives that were lost, kindly ensure that this do not happen again. The conflict which is happening in Uganda, a lot of abduction which are happening. It's so much painful that today one of our counties removed a statement that the politicians who came to have, the politician from Uganda who came to Kenya to have their conversation, the political conversation, were arrested illegally and taken back to Uganda against their will and wish. So what is that one? Are we killing the African relationship or are we building our African relationship? So despite that we want our continent to grow, despite that we want our leaders to address issues, our leaders should know that Africa has risen above their expectation, and their system of leadership or governance should change. They should focus that they are serving people, not people serving them. They should know that these positions are here to build the relationship, but not there to dismantle between the relationship between the government and its citizen. So for me, I'll just urge that despite that people have gone to the street to protest, that won't be the final decision. But other avenues, such as the government learning earlier of the issue that the citizens are speaking about and addressing them on time, can really help to address the issue of maybe economical imbalances that we are facing as a country, and corruption as a mother problem of the entire protest that is happening in Africa.
Thank you immensely, Felix, for your contribution. Meanwhile, you cited some key points, and of course, sometimes when we have such protests, we do have hoodlums that will infiltrate in the bid to create chaos. We saw in Borno State in Nigeria, where about 16 people were killed in a suicide attack, and equally the Kano state government equally mentioned that he had arrested about 50 people as since the beginning of this protest. Meanwhile, it should be reiterated that a divided continent or divided house in Africa cannot stand. Now, this leads me to my next question. Now to you, Jude. You listened to your co-panelists, and of course, when you look at this protest that is ongoing in Nigeria, which is your country, Could you liken it, the outcome, could you liken it to the just ended Dangote saga, which we saw a few days ago, given the economic hardship that these protesters are actually on the streets to demonstrate against? Because we know that the economic situation in Nigeria is not something that dates to today, it's something that has been existing for a long time, given the country is the continent's most populous country. Amidst all this, could you liken it to the Dangote saga, which we saw recently?
Thank you very much, Sarah. And thank you, Dr. Stanley, for emphasizing on the effect of quality of competence over quality of outcome. And I hope these conversations would have kind of a report that would be the panacea for policies and debates and talks in the coming years. Thank you very much, Dr. Stanley. And for Felix, I can relate to the comment you made on where Ugandans delegates who were in Kenya were arrested. I could relate to that on Nnamdi Kanu, who is an agitator for the indigenous people for Igbo, for IPOB, was arrested, which was in Kenya. That was in 2018 and was brought to Nigeria illegally, which was done within Nigeria government and the Kenya government. Now, the present protest can be likened to a variety of issues, not just the Dangote saga. Besides the Dangote saga coming to the limelight, we have issues that it could be likened to, issues like unemployment.
Absolutely.
Every year, Nigerians graduate more than 50,000 youths graduating. Every year, 50,000 youths. That is just the statistic made by one body. Now, the University of Benin graduates 500 youths from a particular department. Now, I'm not just saying the Department of Engineering, nor the Department of History, or the Department of Nursing. I'm saying just one department. And these are people who were able to pay for their fees and finish school. Now, what happened? When Tinubu came into power, he removed the subsidy that was in universities, the scholarships, the loans that were being collected, the subsidized rates that people were paying to go to school. When he came into power, this policy was enforced without the consultation or the negotiation or the inclusivity or the concern of the citizens. Now, part of this protest is aligned to these issues of unemployment, issues of the increased tariff rate of electricity bill of over 300%. The increase in petroleum prices over 300%, and the fall of the naira over 300%. Tinubu came into power when the naira was 500 to a dollar. Now I'm telling you, the naira is 1,500 to a dollar. How does a common man survive? The issue of policies that are enforced without some sort of repercussion or cushioning. There need to be a cushioning of policies. When a policy is enforced, what are the subsidized, what are the alternatives to cushion that policy? That is not put in place. A policy is enforced and there are no cushioning policies to support or purport that policy. Then how does the policy enforced not cause some sort of frustration and cause some sort of agitation? The protest going on would definitely, I believe, would yield a lot of change. Why do I say that? Is prior to the protests, there have been chaos within the institutions, there have been chaos within government parastatals, within the Senate, within the House of Reps and the National Assembly. And comments like, let the people protest and we will be eaten in our house, was made by the Senate President. You can imagine such, disingenuous statements. It shows the lack of empathy. It shows the lack of concern for the people. It shows that leader does not have what it takes to represent the essence and the issues of the people. Now, this protest, what is the issue? Part of what we are talking about is, can the cabinet be restructured? Can we restructure the cabinet? Can the office of the First Lady be scrambled? Can the salaries, incomes of politicians be evaluated? The proportionality of pay gap in the country, the gap is just too much. The average Nigerian citizen is struggling for a minimum pay of 70,000, which has just been accepted by the Nigerian Labour Congress, whereas the MPs, the politicians go home with 29 million monthly salary income. Now, what is happening? How do we bridge this gap? Obviously, when I as a citizen see such an increment or such an escalation of pay, I will get aggrieved. There is a provocation of grievances. Now, if I get aggrieved and I want to air my voices, how do I air my voices? Obviously, it's obvious that we're not common to protest in this country. I heard, I was reading something sometimes back, and Thomas Sankara was saying that take me to a place where the people are held in silence and I never want to be there. Where the people are held in repression and the people cannot speak, I never want to be there. In this country for decades, from pre-colonial, post-colonial, and even presently, we've had the issue of oppression. Now, traditionally, we can't address our elders because of the traumas we had from tradition. Tradition does not allow a fellow Nigerian to speak up to your elder. So we can't really cancel our elders and our leaders. Our leaders are our elders. Now, follow suit with that mindset, with that perception. That perception ongoes, it's concurrent, it's current in politics. In politics, the local government chairman cannot be addressed by the youth wing leader. The local government chairman cannot address the representative of the Senate. The senator cannot address the commissioner of his council. The commissioner of the council find it difficult to address the president, the head of service, the security officers. So there is a disparity of issues where institutions cannot checkmate each other. When there's no checkmate within institutions, how do you expect the masses to stay folding arms and expect these institutions to come up with ideas or policies that will transform these social economic issues? We're coming to the streets because we believe that in demonstrating is our fundamental human rights. And in demonstrating, even if the issues are not going to, all the issues are not going to be addressed, there is going to be limelight on the issues. Some of the issues are going to be addressed, and most of the policies that are in a broad of demands, some of it would be addressed. These are the only ways we know. We have no any other options. We don't have another options where there's somebody who is going to negotiate for our essence or for our purpose, which has been done in the past and which it has been corrupted. We do not trust no government officials to negotiate with, to communicate with, to address us, to solve this issue. So we believe that going to the streets is the only possible outcome we can get from the government, by raising our voices, by expressing our grievances, and hopefully there will be change. I believe what is happening presently in Nigeria is an awakenness of the educated class in the country. The youths, Nigeria has the highest population of graduates. Nigeria has the highest rate of graduates in the continent. Nigeria has the highest graduates abroad, in the diaspora, working abroad. Now, what does that tell you? There is an abundance of human resources. An abundance of human resources, but this human resources, there is a lacking in implementation and usage of these resources. Now, if we have this capacity and we're not being engaged, how else are the people supposed to engage? The possibility of change can only come if the masses, the status quo of capacity that has been developed in this country can be used, can be engaged. Can the youth be engaged? Can those who have graduated get jobs? I was seeing a quote by Elon Musk, and he was saying that if Africa does not develop in 2050, 1 billion jobs in 2050, there will be a lot of conflict in different parts of Africa. This is an African issue. Now, if we just start addressing it from one of the most populous nations in the world, in Africa, sorry to say, and one of the most populous black nations, creating opportunities, creating jobs, creating employment, engaging capacities of the people, these capacities will be engaged in another way. It will be engaged in tyranny, it will be engaged in chaos, and it will be a problem for the continent, a colossal problem for the continent. Whatever is happening in West Africa would replicate itself in East Africa, would replicate itself in Northern Africa. It's just a matter of time. If these issues of unemployment, instability, structural violence are not addressed, and what is the possible option to address this issue? There needs to be some sort of peace building. There needs to be some sense of collaboration within African states, within youths. There needs to be some sort of compromise. There needs to be some sort of negotiation. And we need to dialogue, a collaborative dialogue on how to move forward. And the disappropriation of wealth and the inequality and the inappropriation of wealth needs to be addressed, not just in Nigeria, but in the whole Africa. If issues of
Absolutely.
wealth and management of wealth, the wealth asset management is not addressed in Africa, it's going to be a ticking time bomb for Africans. I hope this protest in Nigeria currently would be some sort of a way to encourage sustainable change, a mandate to enforce the people's opinions and to bring out issues that are underlining for years, that have been causing repression, that have been causing depression, and that has not led us to where we are supposed to be in the world. I hope this protest will yield that outcome.
Absolutely. We hope that it would yield the outcome in the best interest of the Nigerian people. I would like to say I retained something from your contribution, that we should be able to reevaluate those we call leaders, and of course governments will have to recheck their expenditures or their spendings, as well as there needs to be some sort of a proper situation analysis before policies are being implemented. Now back to you, Dr. FONGOD, to listen to your co-panelist. Now, as an economist, when you look at this protest on the African continent in your capacity as an expert, what impact would you say this protest would have on the economic trajectory of the African continent?
It's not good, because it creates an environment where foreign investors will absolutely not come in, and that's just the issues that we face, you know, especially if you start looking at Kenya, if you look at Nigeria, if you look at any hotspots where there's war and conflict, you discover that the economy of those areas are absolutely not growing. So we have to be able to find ways in which, you know, we treat these issues long before they happen. I think that every protest is planned way in advance, and why wait for the protest? Why don't you just sit down with the stake brokers and find out what is it precisely that they're looking for, and then find ways in which we can be able to help solve this. The high rate of inflation in Nigeria, you know, you can, on economic terms, you can just go right back to about 2023 and you'll be able to pick out exactly which day this whole thing started. For truth, $1 is like 1,500 naira right now. It used to be 1,000. It used to be 500. It's 1,500 right now, just like my co-panelist stated, a 300% increase. But this began in May of last year. And the reason for that was because of fuel subsidies. Once you basically once the fuel subsidies were taken out, then the prices at the pump basically skyrocketed. That means goods and services, transportations of raw materials, transportations of goods, from the inland to the coastal regions, everything else basically just, skyrocketed, across the whole entire economy. That was absolutely ill-advised. There has to have been a way in which they could have actually eased the whole entire issues of fuel subsidy, not just a blanketed approach on a single day and then, set the whole entire economy, ablaze. That was absolutely wrong from the Tinubu administration. And then because of the high rate of, corruption that's in the country, if you look at the retention of the exchange dollar, which the reserve that Nigeria has, it's disappeared. That reserve has completely disappeared. So you have too much naira, okay, just a lot of naira competing for a little bit of dollar that's in the country. That's why most airline companies, do not want to hear the issues of that their payments are being done in naira. They prefer for their payments to be done in the dollar because there's no way for them to get that money out of the country because they are very limited amount of dollar competing, for this huge, gigantic volume, of naira when it comes to settling their debt. We have to be able to find a way in which we can be able to help solve these issues on the continent of Africa. And my whole entire idea is this: if we are not able to deal with these issues by finding out precisely why is it that certain things are happening, and then be able to come into a place where we are able to put an end to these things, then eventually what will happen is we will be dealing with countries, okay, that will disappear in relationship to there will be so much chaos in these nations that will not be able to recognize them at all. If you look at a country like Kenya, just before the protest, it was a different place. Right now, it is a place where you don't want to visit. Kenya, it's gone south. And if these things are not being addressed quickly, if increased measures are not being taken to be able to put an end to this protest and the violence that has ensued as a result of the protest, then Kenya will disintegrate and will be looking at Libya, God forbid, or any of those countries that has gone through increased and intense civil war. We have to be able to find a way in which we put an end to the issues that we are facing. I am thinking that if we were going to be able to really talk about how we put an end to this, we must be able to look at increase the economic diversification. That means we must be able to get people into agriculture and industrialization. Two things that is extremely very powerful. Number one, a couple of days ago, they were distributing rice in Nigeria. That kind of, brought down people's temperature so that they basically would not be protesting rice. If we had just increased our economic sector, especially when it comes to agriculture, the agricultural sector, then we'll have reduced our dependency on foreign goods, on foreign imports. And that will basically help the country because those goods within the country, we are not going to be paying a exuberant amount of prices for them. They will be at least as a more lower rate, especially as we are in the era of high inflation. Industrialization is something else that we need to do. We cannot keep importing and importing at the expense of everything else. A couple of years ago, I was in Nigeria. I took out a bottle of juice, exotic fruit juice. It was beautiful. It was good, tasty. I was drinking the whole thing, and the gentleman I was with, Mr. Uche, looked at me and said, "This is manufactured in Nigeria." I was like, "Wow, really?" He said, "Yes." So I picked out the bottle and I began reading the ingredients on the bottle, and right there on the, right there on the table of ingredients, it specifically stated where those ingredients came from. The only thing that was made in Nigeria was the water in which was used to dilute everything that was in it. Water. Everything on that stuff was imported. But yet Nigeria only consumes to the tune of 15% of all the fruits that she produces annually. But the rest goes to our ancestors. It just gets rotten. There are no mechanisms within the countries to convert fruits alone into fruit juice, into fruit juice concentrate, so that we can actually export the fruit juice concentrate or use the fruit juice concentrate to produce the fruit juice that we so love within the country. But we are importing fruit juice concentrate from countries that do not even farm the fruits because those fruits grows in the tropic. So we are, at a loss because we are not into the era of industrialization, and we are basically not making any use of our own agricultural sector. I think we must be able to address these issues from an economic perspective, not just talking about it from a political perspective. The reason why people are protesting is because they're hungry. If they had good paying jobs, if they had the capacity to, if the government understood that they could be able to build up the private sector, allow the private sector to flourish, because the private sector is supposed to be the highest employers in the nation, then everything will be okay. I think we must look at the era of agriculture and the era of industrialization. Those two are things that every African country cannot miss.
Absolutely, Africa needs to maximize what it has to get what it wants, especially while investing in sectors like agriculture, technology, and you name the rest. And now, back to you, Felix. You listen to your co-panelists and the suggestions which they have made in a bid to address this issue on the African continent of bad governance. When you look at the suggestions made so far, it's said that the African continent will need to address this from an economic perspective rather from a political perspective. But in your capacity as an expert, when you observe this, could you say that youth participation, saying governance and decision-making in the affairs of the African continent could equally play a role in addressing this problem?
Yes, thank you so much, and I'm very happy to have my fellow panelists, at least, who are taking on the broader aspect on how Africa can be great through its own means. Speaking of the issue of maybe security, as well as also the issue of agriculture as one of the sector. One thing we can say, youth inclusion in the governance process is very, very, very vital and very, very important because of one, these are the people who are crying out with the issue of unemployment. The population of young people is really increasing. And we also say that if the demand is not equal to the supply, then the supplies will always be frustrated because the demand of job opportunity of maybe the source of incomes are very high than what the country can offer. So when young people truly or actively participate in the governance process, so that means one, when they are electing their leaders at the grassroots level, they should avoid the issue of corruption. I'm going to start with there. Young people being enticed with small little money to make them feel nice so that they can elect a given leader who has an hidden agenda can really help us to address this issue. When young people are there to help in the formulation of the policies becomes so much important than young people waiting for the policies during their implementation level. So we have been having a missing gap of young people not participating in election as one of the reasons that our leaders have been saying that young people, we needed you to help us in voting, but you never came out. But now you are the people who are at the forefront to say that you want reforms in the government. So I think that the way the young people in Kenya have picked this agenda, they picked the agenda of speaking before, not speaking after. So young people need to speak before when it comes to helping informing the government, but not trying to speak of the government which is already formed. Young people should help when it comes to withdrawing the political structures, but not waiting for the political structure to be drawn. So the reason why I'm saying young people participating in political processes is very important is because governments are being formed as a result of political activity, which is known as the election. So when young people knows their role and their power in a political space, then it gives the country easy time maybe to speak on who they want. I want to speak the issue of Senegal. Today, Senegal, the Senegalese young people are celebrating having their president, who is a young person. But this never came on an easy way, but for the way that they got into the street or live along the street. They group themselves outside the streets and ensure that when we are going to the ballot, let our voice be heard, let our interests be seen as a result. Because I've been following up of different countries when it comes to election period. You find that young people who are vying out for the political position, they are never supported by their fellow young people in a lot of cases. That thing has happened in Uganda. Bobi Wine has been really struggling to get into power because when it comes to voting, young people are not voting. But when it comes to walking into the journey, young people are outside. So I'm trying to see the balance of encouraging young people to take this as a challenge, to take into the ballot their decision, to take into their ballot the vision that they have with their country, but not to wait for other people to fight that law. Then they start bringing chaos. Because I believe in one thing. I believe in youthful leadership. Because the Africa we have today has a lot of young people who are being produced from the universities looking for job spaces. If we can focus on young people bringing their creative and innovative ways on how a government should be run, I'm telling you, the government will listen to them. But one thing which I'm still crying for is having a space which is corruption-free for the young people. If the space does not use divide and rule system by bringing a face of young person, because we need young person, but not a young person who knows in heart that I'm outside here to help my fellow young people get employment. I'm outside here to ensure that the debt that my country has is paid. I'm outside here to ensure that we create a long-term goal and a long-term solution for our country. So those are the things which we want to listen to when we want to say young people to join the government or young people to join the political spaces. And that will be easy. And I'm also challenging the government system. Kindly trust young people. Do a recruitment for young people in these spaces. Our country, Kenya, I'm very happy for the president of Kenya, who stated clearly that if you know you are above 60 years old, don't hold any government office. Go home, eat your retirement benefit, because it was so much painful, but the previous government nominated a 96 years old former vice president to stand in the docket of youth advisory. So it is so much painful because this is a space that we need a peer-to-peer engagement. A youth docket should be given with young people, but we still are outside here to listen to the expertise of the elderly people, expertise of the people who was supported the country to grow. So we want to look on the balance on when do we need the voices of young people, or when do we need the expertise of people who have experience in running government as a system. But young people should not sit back and say that we are looking on how the government is being run. If you do that one, there's so much painful there's so much pain of those people who have died. Their families are grieving today. Let's see that the blood of our citizens don't just go in vain by not taking part to bring the reforms in the systems.
Thank you immensely, Felix. Just to reiterate, ladies and gentlemen, if you're joining us, this is a talking point of your Pan-African channel for you, Media Africa. And we're discussing the ongoing situation, the bad governance protest in Nigeria with our guests this day. And of course, that leads me to my next question to you, Jude, picking up from where your co-panelists stopped. Of what essence, since we are trying to bring sustainable growth and development to various nations, be it through protests, be it through advocation and a host of others, in your opinion, as an advocate, as a youth leader, how would you say that, or what role can unity and collaboration amongst African leaders bring to quell this issue of bad governance on the African continent?
Thank you very much, Mr. Felix, for your comment on engaging youths in policy and inclusivity to enforce change and sustainable development. I'm very glad that we have Dr. Stanley, who is a Pan-Africanist, who is in part of the panel, and I'm sure he carries this clarion card to heart. I believe to progress from such mediocrity that Africa is facing, I believe we need more of Pan-Africanist ideology to ruminate within the minds of economics, to ruminate within the minds of religion, to ruminate within the minds of political consensus. Now, why do I say we need a Pan-Africanist ideology? If we seem to have a unification of direction and purpose as a voice, as an ideology, there will be the conscientiousness. Even when you are put in a position to enforce change, either as a youth or either as an elder, you would have the conscientiousness to lead from an angle or an ideology of Africanness, not just nation state. I recount my statement on engaging in a more inclusive Nigerian approach. I believe what we should be looking at now is an African approach. Thank God we have a Pan-Africanist in the panel. I'm sure he would be able to shed light on the prerequisites of which to follow, the ethics to follow, the integrity that demands such ideology, and how to adhere to such an ideology. Because for a very long time, Africans have been deceived. Because now in Nigeria, we believe the protest in Nigeria is Nigerian owned. The protest in Nigeria is the protest of Africa. The protest in Kenya is the protest in Africa. The protest that happened in Uganda is the protest in Africa. Whatever there is quality change and grievances and resilience in any form or region or geographical zone in Africa, that change and policy is a unification of direction, of purpose and alliance. Now, moving forward, if we can have a more flexible way of engaging in conversations, of dialoguing in policies that projects some sense of homogeneous, which is what I would say togetherness. If we don't have such togetherness, we can't strive to attain anything in Africa. Be it today this protest yields some sense of relief. What about in Ghana? Would there be a sense of relief? What about in Togo? Would there be a sense of relief? What about in Cameroon? Would there be a sense of relief? How are we also not just sentimental to our own individual struggles and not thinking of an African, Pan-African level of how we can address issues? If there's an issue in Kenya, what we do is we stereotype the issue, or we're biased towards the issue. Like, oh, it's not in my country, I have nothing to benefit, there's nothing I can do about it. But the truth is, we have some sense of relationship that we share.
Absolutely.
We have a sense of commitment to one another. We have a sense of respect to one another. We have a pool of resources and intellectuals that we can draw from, lessons we can learn from, the media we can use. But unfortunately, we don't share this unification of ideas. The ideology of a Pan-Africanist approach is always seen as utopian. They think you're delusional when you say, oh, why don't we address issue from a Pan-Africanist perspective?
Sorry
and psychologically,
to cut you short.
I won't really blame people because the inception. Pardon?
Sorry to cut you short. Please, could you think of wrapping up, because we are gradually coming to the end of the program.
Thank you very much. The inception of colonialism has brought to our ideas that we can practice individualism, and individualism will not take us anywhere as a continent. If we practice a Pan-Africanist approach to politics, to religion, to economics, then we can see change, hopefully, in this continent.
Thank you immensely, Jude ABHULIMEN. I don't know if I got that correct. Thank you for your contribution. To wrap up this conversation with you, Dr. FONGOD, you listen to your co-panelists and the very powerful points they have evoked in the course of this program. To wrap it up, from a Pan-Africanist point of view, what do you think is the way forward?
I think that we need to be able to build up a more robust Pan-African, free trade agreement, strengthen those free trade agreements on the continent. Free trade agreements in groups like ECOWAS. We need to be able to actually bring this to the African Union. There has to be ways in which we basically open up the whole entire continent so that we can allow for the freedom of goods and services across, so-called pseudo-international boundaries that do exist on the continent of Africa. If that be the case, then we will be doing key investments in areas, like agriculture, in areas like mining, and then we'll be able to include a lot of young people, bring them along the way, because those are the guys who have to carry the mandate for the next generation. So with that being said, I think that just like my co-panelist from Nigeria was talking, we cannot be able to exist on the continent of Africa just as, individual member states. We have to find ways of integrating with one another, at least from the economic perspective of it. Make sure that there are no international boundaries, so far as goods and services are concerned, and then and then limit the issues of visa and, across different African territories. We need this. If that's going to be the case, then everything will be all right.
Absolutely, there needs to be unity amongst African states, cut off all the boundaries, the borders, and of course, a united continent can actually fight all the troubles. I'd like to say thank you, acknowledge the presence of FELIX, of JUDE, and of course of you, Dr. FONGOD, for your contribution on today's edition of Talking Point.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's on that note that we shall be drawing down the curtains of today's edition of Talking Point over your Pan-African channel. Meanwhile, I believe you learned a lot as far as the ongoing protests in Nigeria is concerned, and of course from the conversation as far as African unity is concerned. I've been your host, NJIX NABESEH. Meanwhile, I'll leave you in company of our numerous programs on your Pan-African channel. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.